Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight on the program, ladies and gentlemen, we will cover a few stories before we go to our guest, who will be Miko Peled. Miko is the son of an Israeli general who was in charge of basically supplies during the 1967 war. And at one time, he was the governor of Gaza. We will be speaking with Miko Peled, who turned peacemaker and wants the Palestinians and the Israelis to live together in peace and harmony. We will be speaking to him, and we will talk about the Israeli peace movement that's been out there. As a matter of fact, his father was one of the first ones to start a peace movement. He's one of the founders of the peace movement, and now Miko is very much following in the steps of his dad. But before we go and talk to Miko, let me just cover a couple of items. Number one, the Pope is in town. Well, not really in town, but he's in Washington. And I'm very disappointed, to tell you the truth. I think with the Pope visiting Bush, now he's welcome to come to the United States, but I think he should not have went and visited the government, because I think he legitimized what they had done, even though both the government and the Vatican have basically decided, don't blame us, we won't blame you for whatever, and they have very much decided to stay passive, and I think the media is following suit. I just wish if the Pope did not go to the White House and met with President Bush. And second item, ladies and gentlemen, comes out of Austin, Texas, where a Palestinian American named Riyadh Hamad, he was found dead in a lake over there in Austin yesterday. Riyadh was very involved in Palestinian politics. He had been working for many years, and we do have a picture of Riyadh. He was found floating down a lake over there, and there was duct tape around his mouth. Two witnesses said that there was duct tape around his mouth, and his arms or his hands were bound behind him. So definitely there was a foul play. Is there a problem with the pictures that we not putting his picture on? Or did we put it on? Did they didn't look to see if they put the picture on or not? The thing is, was this a foul play? Did he die because of his involvement in Palestinian causes, that somebody wanted to very much shut him up? That is Riyadh, and they found him yesterday dead. He was involved in a Palestinian children fund, where they were buying books and crafts and things like this and sending them over to Palestinian children. Definitely it's a loss for those children who were dependent on Riyadh for whatever gifts he was able to give them or send them. And ladies and gentlemen, the next thing is, normally during wars, the press, and it's in the Geneva Convention that the press should not be attacked. The press there are with cameras and should not be attacked. So what is coming out of Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday is one of the Reuters photographers, cameraman, was attacked with by an Israeli tank that very much, and we will show you a picture, the last picture he took of the tank shooting directly at him. And if we can put that picture up with the tank. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, in the Geneva Convention, very much during war, a clearly marked vehicles with its medical or press should not be attacked, because these are people who do not carry weapon, and they don't have any there's no threat to anyone from someone who has a camera, unless they don't want him. This is the car that he was riding in, and clearly it is marked Reuters press. And on both sides, I have seen pictures of this car from front, back, and sides, and it has in big letters TV, as you see way up there. And this is what happened to it. That first shot that we showed you, where an Israeli tank deliberately targeted this Jeep. You can even see the flames shooting out of the Israeli tank. And then a few seconds later, it hit his Jeep. And, of course, Fadl Shana, who is the cameraman with Reuters, died. It's interesting, ladies and gentlemen. If this had been any country besides Israel, I think we will see criticism from all sides. If this had been an Egyptian tank that hit a TV or a press person, we will see criticism, or an Iraqi or an Iranian, whatever. But because it's an Israeli tank, then it is in the minds of the press or whatever, it is permissible. Like we said, ladies and gentlemen, our guest for tonight is an Israeli peacemaker. His name is Miko Peled. He is the son of one of his fathers, considered an Israeli war hero, and at the same time he is also considered an Israeli peacemaker, because his father was one of the people who very much called for the establishment of a Palestinian state way back in 1968, at a time when everybody very much thought he was out of his mind to even suggest that. But his father, Matti Peled, went on to be one of the main figures in the peace movement in Israel, a movement that we are going to discuss with Miko, of how effective this movement is in lieu of what is going on within the Israeli society, which it seems like it is headed more to towards the religious right. And we will see. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome to the program Miko Peled. Miko, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Hello, can you hear me?
All right, just one little technical. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Now I can hear you. Miko, let's start with how you, someone who very much spent 3 years in the Israeli army, I think that is mandatory, and then your father was a general in the Israeli army, but yet you are struggling to make peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And also, to add to that, your own niece, Samada, I think, was killed by a Palestinian attack on a mall in Jerusalem. But yet, for someone like you who should be very upset, and I read where your sister, Samada's mother, who even said that she does not blame the suicide bombers, she blames the occupation. Just briefly, Miko, tell me, how did you yourself become a peacemaker after very much you carried a gun to destroy the enemy?
Well, it's a long process. Growing up as I did, like you said, with a father who was an Israeli general, of course, I grew up admiring the Israeli army very much and wanting to be a part of it. And the reality is that growing up as an Israeli, you are privy to very little of what actually took place between 1948 and the creation of the State of Israel and so forth. And then over the years, particularly as my father became more and more involved with meeting people from the PLO and discussing the possibility of peace with the Palestinians, the reality of the possibility of peace with the Palestinians became more and more clear, and the fact that this was in the best interest of everybody. And so, growing up in Israel, regardless of the fact that my father was a general, even if he wasn't, Israel is a very militant society. Everybody admires the military very, very much. And there's very little that's actually told or taught about the history of the creation of the State of Israel. And so I think the first time I even heard the word Palestinian, I was probably 17 or 18. And I grew up in Jerusalem, which is supposed to be a mixed city. They're called, the Arabs of Israel. All the Arabs are the same, and these just happen to be the Arabs of Israel. They have no particular identity or anything like that. So over the years, little by little, I discovered that there was such a thing as Palestinians, and there was they did have national aspirations, and they weren't all killers, and they were, people just like everybody else. But I would say that probably the biggest thrust as far as my own involvement and my own realization came many years later here in the U.S., right around the year 2000, when I became involved with a Jewish-Palestinian dialogue group here in San Diego, where I live. And I met for the first time in my life, having been born in Jerusalem, for the first time in my life, having met face-to-face with Palestinians who were not subservient to me in any way, who were not under occupation, who were not working, for an Israeli contractor, who had nothing to gain or lose from me as an Israeli. The first time I met Palestinians that could sit and talk to me eye to eye at, completely on completely equal terms was here in San Diego, and I was, 39 years old. And what happened was that these people had a story that, although a lot of what they said I knew and a lot of what they said I agreed with, but they had stories that I'd never heard before, which today I know refer to the Nakba, to the catastrophe, to the destruction of Palestine, to the expulsion of 800,000 people from their homes, and so on and so forth. And that was a big eye opener for me. And then I began researching, and I remember the exact moment when we were sitting there, and one of my Palestinian friends talked about a particular issue that had to do with the War of 1948. And I thought I knew, of course, everything because my father fought in that war, and then my mother was, in Jerusalem, and they were under siege, and there was, and all this. And he made some statements about the forces, how many forces the Israelis had and how many forces the Palestinians had, and I never heard that before. And I thought that was impossible. We were the David, they were the Goliath, not the other way around. And at that moment, I had to really decide whether or not I was going to investigate this and take a deeper look into my own identity and to the identity of my friends and my neighbors who are Palestinians, or not. And I chose to do that, and I started reading some of the history books that came out of Israel over the last 10 years that talk about what actually took place in 1948 and what the Nakba was and all that. And then I realized that I didn't really know a lot of what took place, and that Israelis are not privy to this information. This was never taught. This was never spoken of. And, this has been a process of, of almost 10 years now where I've been thinking about this, writing about this, talking about this, being involved closely with Palestinians. And then one day about 4 or 5 years ago, I went to visit a Palestinian friend who lives in Amman, and then we crossed back into Israel. Now he's from the 48 generation, so he was 3 years old when his family was expelled, and we both came back, and it dawned on me, I can come and go as I wish. He can only come back because he's an American citizen, and he can come back only as a tourist. And I thought, his ancestors, he has more ancestors living on that land than I do. My grandparents immigrated. His great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, are still buried there in Nazareth. And I thought, how must he be feeling, He was born there, he's got family there, he's got ancestors there, he's got property, land, well, doesn't own it anymore, but he had land there, his father had land there, and he can come in as a tourist, and I can come and go freely. So, these were all experiences that forced me to take a really good look at the reality and what's going on, and the need to create real equality and stop this insane racist situation that's taking place there right now.
Miko, let me ask you this. You mentioned a couple of interesting points. Number one, that you knew little about what took place in 1948, or taught little of that history. And then that you really did not know much about the Palestinians, and your understanding was that Israel was David and the Palestinian was Goliath, but the facts were the other way around. Is everybody in Israel very much given this information or this misinformation? Because the first thing any society or any country wants to tell its people about the enemy is very much, know your enemy. But it looks like in Israel it's misinformation about the enemy.
Well, I think that every country that has blood on its hands, every country that has done wrong to another nation, tends to hide that from its own people. If you look at the Japanese, they don't teach what happened, what they did to the Chinese and the Koreans. If you look at America, they don't really admit to the Holocaust that took place here against the Native Americans. It's not something that happened. I think the only people that are actually come face to face with their own monstrosities are the Germans, because I think they're probably the only nation that teach World War II and the Holocaust even more than they do in Israel. And so I don't know that it's not, it's probably typical to hide the skeletons. But in Israel today, the education system, and it was that way when I was growing up, and it's probably even worse today. There's a complete ignorance about what the Palestinians are, who they are, why they're there, how they got there, and their relationship with us, with Israel as a state. And so not only is it not taught, but they're completely ignored. My sister wrote a paper on the Israeli textbooks, and she used mostly geography books. And there are maps there in that book, in Israeli geography books, maps that talk, for example, about Israel and its neighbors. There are maps of, universities and learning institutions in Israel. And when you look at these maps, the map includes everything from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. But there is no Palestinian entity there. There are no Palestinian institutions. There are no Palestinian cities. There's nothing. They don't exist. And then when you do learn about Palestinians, the only thing you see are either little caricatures of the guy with the keffiyeh, the mustache, and the camel, or you see kind of an aerial picture of a refugee camp, which is kind of dark and full of poor people. And Israelis growing up, this is what they see. This is what they think Palestinians are. Some kind of a nomadic, some kind of a transient population that just happens to be sitting around in different places in our country.
Now, Miko, apparently, if you learned that in Israel, so most of Israeli children learn very much about the same story. And probably in some other schools, they probably even teach more. And this is what I want to talk to you about, is the Israeli society. If you would say, now, were you raised at in a Jewish home?
Jewish in that we were Jewish, but not by any means Orthodox or anything like that. Not a religious home, no.
Okay. So, I mean, the Orthodox Jews, like for instance, there was an attack a couple of months on the Merkaz Ha'arv, the center of the rabbis, and you know, these people I have studied very much, and I went deeper into their theology, which is very much this land was given to us as a gift from God, and we are to redeem ourselves. We have to very much cleanse the land and redeem the land itself and bring it to the side, the divine side, from the satanic side. I'm sure that was not taught in your home or the school that you went to, but that idea, is it very well taught, and a lot of people in Israel believe in that idea?
You know, I don't. I don't think that the Merkaz Ha'arv, that whole yeshiva, that whole institution is probably closer to the Taliban than it is to anything that's Israeli or Jewish, as far as their militancy, as far as their desire to what they learn and the racism and everything that they teach, and the hatred that they propagate. The way most Israelis are taught is some kind of a quasi-liberal racism. In other words, we're actually good and we want peace, and we're ready to make peace with the Palestinians any day. But I mean, look at them. They're animals. They're monsters. They shoot at us. They send suicide bombers. They send Qassam rockets at us. And as much as we want to give them land, and as much as we want to make peace with them, they won't cooperate. This is the theme. I think Ehud Barak's biggest success was that after the Camp David, he managed to convince the Israeli all parts of the Israeli society that he in fact exposed the Palestinians exposed the Palestinians as the liars and the people, the warmongers that they really are, because there he was willing to give them everything, and they refused, which means that they want to kill us all. And that is still the predominant, I would say, among people who are educated, people who could easily be part of a peace movement if there was a peace movement in Israel, but there is none right now. These would be the people. These are like liberal, educated, upper middle class people. This is what I hear all the time from people who I grew up with. And they read my stuff and they go, well, how come? Why don't you talk about our suffering? And I'm going, excuse me, you compare yourself to Gaza? And they go, yeah, but look at these people. They're shooting Qassam rockets at us. This is the prevalent opinion. This is the prevalent thought. They just don't want peace, and we just have to get in there, and we've got to, we have to hit them harder and harder and harder until they understand that peace is the only way. There's no sense of understanding, of compassion to the fact that we have imprisoned 3 million people, that we are starving 3 million people, that we are continuously on an ongoing basis for 60 years trying to, very, very slowly create a genocide. There's no recognition of the fact that the Zionism that's in control in Israel today is a very radical, very militant type of.
Who is Miko? Who is in control of Israel today? Can you tell me?
Well, it's a very, very militant, radical brand of Zionism that has been in control in Israel for the last 60 years. Some years, some forms were a little more extreme than others. Certainly now it's probably the most radical, most extreme version, the most militant version that's been, from the creation of Israel.
Could that be because now the religious movement, the Jewish religious movement, have more say-so in the government than they did before? Could that be the reason?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with religious. I mean, Ehud Olmert and Lieberman and all these people, and certainly Sharon and Barak and all those people, they couldn't care less about religion. You know, for them it's a political tool. The only thing they care about is to get rid of these Arabs and to control the land and control the water, and that's it. So I don't think it's a religious thing. It's just a very, very militant nationalistic movement that sees zero-sum game.
Now,
end of story.
Okay. Now, you very much did not know much about the Palestinians who basically live next door, and probably a lot of these homes that the Israelis are living in today probably were Arab homes and Palestinian homes. And incidentally, speaking of Arab homes, your mother back in 1967, she actually refused to occupy one of these homes because it belonged to somebody else. Is that correct?
Yeah, not 67, in 48.
In 48.
She was living in Jerusalem with her mother and my dad. My dad was in the front fighting, I think, in the south. And on the Egyptian front, and as the Jewish forces were coming in, the Palestinians were leaving. And of course, being the wife of an officer and the daughter of a very respected member of the Israeli cabinet, what was then the Jewish cabinet, it wasn't really a cabinet yet, but it was kind of a de facto Israeli government, Jewish government in Palestine. She was offered, and these are beautiful homes. Anybody who's ever been to West Jerusalem has seen these. These are.
I've seen those homes, yes.
And she was offered, one of those homes, and she said there's no way that she would ever be willing to live in the home that belongs to another family. And I remember her telling me the story as a child, growing up, over and over again, how the homes were left with the breakfast was still warm, the coffee was still warm on the table, and people came in and started looting. And she said she remembers watching the trucks driving by with the carpets and with the furniture and thinking, how can they do this? How can this take place? How can people take somebody else's home?
Is that's Jewish?
She refused, so she refused. And today, of course, we're very grateful. At the time, we didn't really appreciate. We didn't really realize what this meant. But today, of course, that we all know, what this meant. This was part of an ethnic cleansing campaign, which is deplorable. Then we're all very proud of the fact. She's still alive. She's 81. That she was. She was.
Okay. So Miko, in your case, and in your sisters and probably other siblings' case, you were very much nursed the idea of living with the Palestinians side by side, or accepting it from childhood. Now, we are in 2008, and the way it's been going since 2000, very much the Israelis should know now more than they did before, and they should know that the lies that the Israeli government is giving them. But why we used to see more of a peace movement 20 years ago than we do now. Why is that? What happened to the Israeli peace movement?
Well, I don't think they should know. Why should they know? They're not being taught. I mean, kids learn what they learn in school. The societies are completely segregated. Israelis don't have to see a Palestinian and don't get to see a Palestinian ever. They don't see one. They don't talk to a Palestinian.
What about, Miko, now we have like hundreds of channels. They see all kind of different channels. They have the internet. But there's more information out there for them to see.
Yeah, but you've got to look for it. You've got to want to see it. You need to have a desire to see it. People getting up in the morning, going to school, going to work. They don't have an interest in seeing that. For them, what they hear in their own, they read the headlines and they hear the news, the evening news in Hebrew, and they know that the Palestinians want to throw us all into the sea and that they're enemies, and that we need to get in there and show them, teach them a lesson. This is what Israelis learn. This is what they know. There's no reason for them to know. And the thing is, part of the success of the Zionists, this radical Zionist enterprise, was that they managed to create a separation. And the whole idea of the separation started with Ben Gurion in the 30s. He coined the word hafrada, which is separation. and the separation is complete. In other words, like I told you in the beginning, I grew up in Jerusalem after '67, after the war, and I never met a Palestinian. And people who live in the Galilee, whose town might never mind that it's on Palestinian land, but is next, just a stone's throw away from a Palestinian town. They don't know anything about these people. They've never seen them. They never meet with them. There are no sporting events. There are no cultural events. People who venture to go into an Arab village, into a Palestinian village in the Galilee is like, are you sure? It's not dangerous. Well, what if somebody kidnaps? The sense of detachment, the sense of apartheid there is so strong that people do not have a clue, and they have no desire to have a clue. They're happy living in their own little world. And I read an article. There's a wonderful book publisher by the name of Andalus, and what they do is they publish Arabic literature into Hebrew. And in fact, my father, after he retired from the military, he taught Arabic language and literature, and he translated some works, and he worked a lot on Palestinian. He's one of the first people that ever introduced Israelis to the fact that there is a Palestinian literature, the Palestinian culture, in that term, in those terms. So they translate that, and they had an article describing the Israeli, living as though they were in Europe or something, not realizing that they are right in the heart of the Arab world, right in the heart of the Muslim world, and even within Israel, at least 50% of the population comes from a Middle Eastern culture. In other words, they speak Arabic, and their parents spoke Arabic, and a lot of them could probably speak and read Arabic, except you go into a bookstore and there is nothing in Arabic. There are no Arabic books, and there's no and the very little books that are being translated from Arabic to Hebrew. So there's absolutely no connection, no cultural connection, no political connection, no social connection that is being permitted between the sides. And so the wall that is being built now is just one more step in this desire to separate and keep the Israelis away from learning about the Palestinians. And it's been very, very successful. And today, as you drive up Israeli highways and you see the walls from the Israeli side, it's decorated, it's painted, they made it look really, really nice. And you think, well, if they built a wall, then there must be dangerous people on the other side. Why would I want to cross? And I cross myself. When I go there, first of all, I have friends on the other side. And a couple of years ago, a friend of mine and I, a Palestinian friend of mine and I, put together a project to send wheelchairs to Israeli and Palestinian children, and the wheelchairs that went to the Palestinian side went to a rehabilitation hospital in Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. And so on the way back into Jerusalem from Bethlehem, we went to the checkpoint, which is an experience that is indescribable. It's just indescribable. It's so horrific. I was arrested because Israelis are not permitted to go into the Palestinian towns.
Wow.
And it boggles the mind. Why would you not want? You know what I mean? In other words, the planning and the design of the separation is so meticulous and so successful, and that's why Israelis don't know, and they don't care to know, because they think Palestinians live miles away.
It wasn't for fear of safety. It's just they don't want Israelis to know what's on the other side of the wall.
No, of course not. It's to create fear.
Before the wall was even put up. Now, you mentioned something which it goes like in the it's been going on for a long time, which is throw the Jews in the sea, and that very much came out of the 1967 war. But your dad, back in 1972, he very much blew that myth. He put a big dent in that myth when he said that the thesis according to which Israel was fighting for her very physical survival was nothing but a bluff, which was born and bred after the war. So right. This is coming, this is old, but coming from an Israeli general, it was not even picked up by not even the local newspapers anywhere. Was your father, some of them very much called him all kind of names, from traitors to, even though he has a long history of fighting for Israel, was your dad in line when he? I mean, this could be like one of Israel's dirtiest secrets. Was he in line to bring that out in the public?
Well, of course he was. He was a man who spoke what he thought and described what he saw. His transformation came a lot earlier. He was after the Sinai campaign in the mid-50s. He was assigned to be the governor of Gaza, the military governor of Gaza. And in an interview he gave, before he passed away about 10, 12 years ago. And he said this many times before that. He said that he remembers that he looked at the regulations and the administrative responsibilities that he had, and it reminded him of how an occupation army. Like I think he compared it to the British governor of Palestine and all the rights that he had and all the and it shocked him. It shocked him to think that he was being put as an Israeli in a position to hold another nation under occupation, and this is in the mid-50s. And he says that having spoken to the Palestinian population, he realized that these people don't want to kill us. They don't want to throw us into the sea. They want to live in peace. They want to find a resolution and move on with their lives. And he, of course, tried to pass that message on to his superiors, and nobody wanted to listen, and nobody really cared. But that was his first transformation, and then he decided that he was going to study Arabic, and by 1967, he was probably I don't know if he was the only one, but certainly there were no more than 2 generals on the Israeli staff who spoke Arabic. So in other words, I remember as a child he would be listening to Nasser's speeches and things like that on the radio. So he knew what people were saying. He knew what the Palestinians were saying. He knew what the Egyptians were saying. He knew what was going on. And there was an excellent movie that came out recently called about the 6-Day War. I think it's called 6 Days or something. And in that movie, it's very clear how the military knew very well there was no danger. There was no potential danger threat to
Is he on
at
his cell
all.
phone?
They kept it from the population. They wanted the people in the government to think that they were in grave danger. They were in grave danger, and the general staff, all of the generals, they were young. They were in their early 40s. Most of them were born, in what was then Palestine, but they were born there. Most of them served in the Haganah and the Palmach. So in other words, they were all very militant people, very young, very militant, very radical Zionists, and they manipulated the government, and they manipulated the people. So then, years later, when people started, still said that yes, there was an existential threat, he said that was nonsense. There was never an existential threat, and everybody in the military knew it. The people didn't know it.
Okay.
They kept it from the people because they wanted that war. They saw it as an opportunity to do what they wanted to do all along, which was occupy the whole of the land of Israel.
Miko,
to continue what they did in 48.
Yeah, how many Israelis do you think there are living in the United States?
Israelis?
Yes.
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Is there like an Israeli community in the United States?
There is an Israeli community in some of the big cities, yes.
Now, to your knowledge, what I'm getting at is to your knowledge, are there Israelis here in the United States with the same type of mentality and outlook as you are, or are you the Lone Ranger?
No, I'm quite. I don't know if I'm the only Lone Ranger, but I'm certainly one of them. I certainly don't represent any community at all. And people. I can't. It's not like Israeli communities invite me to speak and read my articles or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. No, there's no.
Are you shunned by the Israeli community, or?
Well, I don't know that I'm shunned. I'm sure that they don't like what I say, and if given the chance to hear me or not to hear me, they'd rather not hear me.
What about Jewish Americans?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, Jewish America is by and large very Zionist, and so what I have to say is really not what they want to hear.
Okay. Now,
that's not, I don't want to generalize. Of course, there's always a minority of people who have read the books and have been there and know what's going on and are aware of what's going on, but that would be the minority.
Now, once, God forbid, something happens to Uri Avneri, who's there to lead the peace movement after him?
Well, I think, well, first of all, there is no peace movement within Israel. I think that the notion of needing a peace movement with Israel is outdated. I think what needs to happen right now, and I'm certain that this is going to happen within the next 5 years, is there's going to be an anti-apartheid movement. And the anti-apartheid movement has to include Israelis and Palestinians and people from around the world who care. And because in the end, the solution is not going to be an Israeli solution, and it's not going to be a Palestinian solution. It's going to be a solution where both sides, together as equals, reach a decision to move on together. So I don't think there's a need for an Israeli or Palestinian.
That sounds great, but when you look at the Israeli settlers in the West Bank and you see them toting guns in the streets, and today I came across a video, I think on YouTube or one of those services, where Palestinian school children going to school in Hebron were attacked by Jewish settlers, basically children too, throwing rocks at them. And then you see the settlers in the West Bank and you see what they're doing. Just 2 weeks ago they had very much ran over a Palestinian crossing the street, a shepherd, around Nablus. And so these, if Israelis and Palestinians can create this movement to start talking to each other, which I agree with you, it's going to have to be the people who are going to eventually very much make this movement. But what do you do with these guys with guns who believe that they're going to heaven when they kill a Palestinian?
I don't know, but I think
because they're not going. You can't negotiate with these people. Someone who thinks that God had given him the land, and for him to go to heaven, he's going to have to kill the Palestinians off that land and make it Jewish only. You can't even negotiate with this guy.
Well, I think well, several things. First of all, I think if and when this movement, this anti-apartheid movement, develops, and if it's done in a way that has equality and justice and nonviolence as its principles, then I think, and I may be way too optimistic here, but I think the support for these people will dwindle. If it's done in a proper way, then the rule of law will prevail, and these people will put under will be the weapons will be taken away, and they'll be put under arrest, where they belong. I think the important thing is, obviously you can't ignore the fact that these people exist, and you can't ignore the fact that they're very dangerous to everybody. I mean, they're dangerous to Palestinians, and I know what they do in Hebron. It's deplorable. There's no question about that. At the same time, they're there, and something is going to have to be. There's going to have to be some kind of resolution with that includes them. I'm not sure what it's going to be, and I don't know what it's going to look like. But I think that it's important to first of all realize that the discussion has to be on the how and when of dismantling of the apartheid, as opposed to the borders of a future Palestinian state.
Now let's spend
or the corruption among the the PA and that kind of nonsense that keeps coming back and back.
Miko, let's spend the remaining time discussing. We talk about a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, and we talk about George Bush's vision of two states, which I think it came to be when Gaza and the West Bank became two states, but I didn't think that's what he had in his mind. I don't know, maybe that's what he did have in his mind. But So do you think having a two-state, that solution, in your opinion, is dead? You think that what will work is basically a South African model where blacks and whites live together? You think that's the only option still remains there?
Yes, definitely. There's no way to... so separation and segregation is not going to work. It hasn't worked, and it's not going to work, and it's fruitless and pointless. I think the discussion on the two-state solution only helps the occupation. The only discussion that needs to happen now is on what kind of constitution the state is going to have, and how everybody's going to be included in the process, so that it is a democracy, and everybody gets to participate, and everybody's rights are protected by constitution and by law. That needs to be the discussion, and of course, and realizing going into this that Israel is going to violently oppose any attempt to create equality, and so this has to be taken into consideration going into this. But there's no question that Israel has completely obliterated any chance of a Palestinian state ever being created, and it did this deliberately.
So are you saying this new one-state solution is of course, it's an idea of a very slim minority now between Palestinians and probably even slimmer on the Israeli side. But I mean, are you saying that the Israeli culture is in its winter season now, that we probably will be seeing this Palestinian-Israeli hybrid culture in the future?
Well, first of all, the one state already exists. The one state is already here. There's no, I want to make that absolutely clear. The one state exists. It's not one option of several. There is one state today. Israel controls every single aspect of life for Palestinians and for Israelis. It's just that they live under two different sets of rules, or three, I should say. But there's one state today. There isn't, the one state already exists. The only possibility now to bring some kind of a normalcy to the region is to change it from a racist apartheid kind of a state into a pluralistic democracy that includes every single citizen, every single person who lives on the land as an equal citizen. And so this is, I think that has to be, this is something that seems to be very difficult for people to accept. There is already one state. It's not like we can't get to pick. The one state exists. It's Israel, and it's an apartheid state. The reality is that if we want to bring any kind of peace, any kind of normalcy, any kind of sense of justice, and create a normal place to live, it has to be a democracy. The apartheid has to be dismantled. This thing called the occupation, which is really just another word for maintaining the apartheid, has to be dismantled. There has to be elections where everybody votes. There has to be some kind of a constitution that everybody is a part of, and we move on from there. That has to happen, or it's just going to stay like this as an apartheid state. There is no other possibility that I see.
Okay.
Looking at.
Tell me about your efforts here in the States. I know there was like a group, a dialogue going on between Israelis and Palestinians in California, and one of the people I think that you met was Nader al-Banna, and yes. you and him became very good friends. Is there something that would be expanded? I mean, would this idea be expanded to include more Palestinians, more Israelis, and even more Jews, not necessarily Israelis, into the movement, or into whatever idea our group that you guys have started?
Well, it's hard to call it a movement. Based on our own personal experience, Nader and I decided to do some things together. Most of the stuff that we do together, I would say, is more humanitarian and educational rather than political. And so we've created, we're in the process of creating a foundation which is going to support, do more like the wheelchairs thing that we did, and support education, education efforts, and support groups, because there's a lot of grassroots movements that are joint, that are Israeli and Palestinian, that work over there. I wouldn't know to say a lot, but there's certainly several very, very powerful, very, very strong, and very good groups that work over there for dialogue and to bring people together. There's the Bereaved Families group, which is growing by the day, unfortunately. There are the Combatants for Peace, who are absolutely the most impressive group of young men that I've ever met, who are resistance fighters on the Palestinian side and Israeli soldiers on the other side, who have decided to lay down their arms, and they do remarkable work. And they need support. They need support of money, and they need support with PR, and they need all kinds of support. And we'd like to be able to, living here, as having the advantage of being a Palestinian, is an Israeli who live in a place where they're equals, gives us a lot of possibilities that they don't have over there. To go from Jerusalem to Anata, which is a skip and a hop from Jerusalem, is like going to, it's unbelievable, the difficulty. And of course they have no equality there. Here, Israelis and Palestinians are equal, at least under the law. And so we have a lot more possibilities. And so our desire is to support things that happen over there. I personally am a lot more of a political kind of a creature, and so I write and I speak, and then I talk about this idea that I believe is important, which is to create a real democracy that will allow Israelis and Palestinians to enjoy their land and enjoy their culture and enjoy their country and live in this lovely, in this wonderful country that could be a wonderful place to live in. Once again, once the apartheid is dismantled.
Okay. It's interesting that Nader fought in the 1968, I guess, probably Al-Karama, battle.
He fought Al-Karama battle, yes.
And your brother was in the same battle too. A tank commander or on a tank staff, I think.
Yes.
So they probably may have came.
Yes, and they met. They actually met last year when Nader and I were doing the wheelchair project, and we went to Tel Aviv, and we had a good meeting with my brother and everything. It was very interesting. It was very good.
Yeah.
The personal touch, the personal relationships between Israelis and Palestinians, I think, are going to be a crucial component of the resolution, because the realization that takes place every single time, of course it takes time, but every single time Israelis and Palestinians actually do meet and do get to know each other, they both realize that there is no enemy. In other words, there is an enemy, but it's not the Israelis and it's not the Palestinians as people that are the enemies.
Well, they're all people and they're all humans. Now let me ask you one last question. Were you taught that being a Jew was something that is more superior to Gentiles or non-Jews?
Absolutely not. I had this conversation here actually recently with somebody, and I said, Americans, and they said, well, God gave you the land because you're the chosen people. And I said, there's no such thing as a chosen people. I don't believe in a chosen people. Every child is chosen, just as chosen, whether he's a Jew or an Arab. Who cares? If there's a God, he doesn't care. And they said to me, well, then you're not a real Christian.
Mike,
said, well, I'm not a Christian to begin with.
Mike, I tell you what, I even forgot to go to the phones because I was enjoying this conversation. But let me very quickly, we don't have much time, let me very quickly go to the phones with John. John, I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Tillawi, this is John, and I wanted to ask Michael, and Michael is a delightful person. Michael, you mentioned that you weren't bred too deeply in your rich Jewish heritage. Have you encountered the concept of the Pax Dravidica, or if I may give it in Hebrew from the book of Ezekiel, Shalom David? Which is a wonderful concept. And then the second thing I wanted to share with you...
Okay, John, we have 1 minute.
Scholars I shared with Dr. Tillawi several weeks past.
John, very quick.
1283 BC, or BCE as we say, before the Common Era, there was a pact sign, a treaty signed between Ramses the Great, Ramses II of Egypt, because Egypt had Syria, what we now call Syria, Palestine, as a province called Cana, which is an Egyptian term that means the land of purple in the context of the land of purple merchants. Because as you know,
John, very quick, we're running out of time.
Great city created purple cloth in the ancient world.
I didn't hear his question. I can barely hear him.
Ramses II and the king,
John,
the Hittite king.
John, very quick, ask the question.
And they bequeathed the
Okay,
land.
John, I'm sorry, I have to, because we are running out of time, actually. I thought he was going to ask. Any final comments, Miko? We're running out of time.
Well, if anything, I would just recommend that any Palestinians or any Israelis that are listening to this, number one, start talking to each other here in the U.S. Take advantage of the fact that we have the ability to do that here, and number two, let's all get together and put together this anti-apartheid movement. Give it some strength here in the U.S.
Very good, Miko. All I have time is to say thank you very much for coming on the program. It has been a pleasure. Salam, shalom, peace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Israelis and Palestinians can talk, and they do, but it's politicians that prevent them from talking. Good night. Next week we're not going to be here, so we'll be
opinions expressed in